Good afternoon, everybody. We are coming to the last session of this really incredible, fascinating conference. I was asked to be a chairperson. The title of our panel, yes, Bridging World, the Impact of Financial and Social Remittances Sent Back by the Afghan Diaspora on the Evolution of Social Values and cultural concepts in the country of origin. So our first speaker is Abdul-Hakim Hamidi, and he is an author, a director, and a researcher at the Institute of Oriental Languages in France. So please, we can start.
So, thank you very much, dear distinguished guests and organizers. I am deeply honored to be with you at this conference, and thank you very much for having me. About the subject, as you see here in the presentation, in my presentation, I will begin with by exploring the history and motivation behind Afghan migration. And next, I will address the hypothesis that Afghans have historically been mobile, engaging with the other communities, their nations, countries in various ways. Following this, I will return to the central question to analyze the impact of the Afghan diaspora on socio-cultural shifts within their home communities. And finally, I will conclude the discussion. So I will start with a very short introduction, and if I can change right, okay. Double absence or double présence, or I can say double absence and double presence. These two terms are really interesting for me. The first was introduced by Abdul-Malik Sayyad in his book, and the second was by Catherine in her analysis of African diaspora in France within the context of literature, underscores the dynamic nature of the diasporic journey, highlighting the interplay between traversing territories, temporalities, and embracing multifaceted identities. I believe this term, I mean the last one, double presence, can be aligned and can be closely to the concept of transnationalism that emerged in 70s. In addition, as also elucidate in a Nation on Board in 1994, immigrants are not confined to a single location, but rather exist across multiple locales. With this very short introduction, I would like to go to the reason and history of Afghan migrants. As you see here, political instability, armed conflict, poverty and economic problems, and individual decision are the main reasons for displacement, for mobility. But about Afghans, it's interesting to say that personal adventures and competitions among peers, particularly among youth and adolescents, known as siyal in Persian, represent an overlooked phenomenon that has led to increased mobility. Romantic disappointments, family conflict, as well as inspiration drawn from stories, series, and films have also frequently motivated the decision to pick bags in preparation of migration. These narratives, although less prominent, have at times been overshadowed either because they are less conspicuous than forced migration or because they don't fall within the framework of Geneva Convention 51, those taking on the hue of forced migration. the particular attention given by international humanitarian and charitable organization as well as human rights advocacy group to forced migration has helped promote a compassionate view towards migration, as shown by Alexandro Monsuti in his book War and Migration in 2005. The next step is about migration wave, Afghan migration wave. The Migration Policy Institute in 2001 identified 4 major waves of Afghan migration. The first was during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. At the peak was almost 6 million Afghans left the country. And the second was just after withdrawal of Soviet Union from Afghanistan. The third one began with the civil war and rise of the Taliban, and the fourth one after the fall of the Taliban the first time. So in total, I would say almost 6 million people have left Afghanistan. And among these 6 million people, or more or less, almost 13% have found their way to the European countries. But the fifth wave also, it's not mentioned in this category that I would like to add after the fall of government in August 2021. It's almost many people have trying by the evacuation program that has been led by the United States and other alliance. So migration as a personal and family strategy. The story in addition to presenting compelling religious perspective, as you see here, I'm Nisa 97. I put it here in my presentation. It's exactly about migration. Sydney Means in 1998 argues that the widespread movements of people across the globe have deep historical roots spanning centuries. This argument received notable reinforcement in the context of Afghanistan, convincingly substantiated by Cruz in his book in 2015, as you see here, the second part in Afghan Modern. Migration as a mass strategy. So the study of the Afghanistan case has also shed light on another crucial aspects. Wars and political problem insecurities have transferred migration from an individual and family strategy to a mass one, where thousands of people were trying to live and forced to live. For example, the first during the invasion of Soviet Union, the second was during the Civil War, and the third after the collapse of Afghan government in 2021 August. The main question is, what is the impact of these migrants on the country of origin, for example, on social values as well cultural concepts such as solidarity, marriage, commitment, responsibility, family, and so on. So like many other communities, the Afghan diaspora maintains connection with their homeland through both social and financial remittances. First, I would like to talk about financial remittances that you see here in this picture. I put them. The significant scale of this migration have also facilitated the rapid movement of goods and money predominantly through informal channel like a hawala system, rather the official means like Western Union or MoneyGram. Estimating the extent of hawala system is challenging due to the lack of registration of hawala transactions in official database, and also it was not another system was not existing during it's a long time in Afghanistan. Nevertheless, the commencement of operation by system like Western Union and MoneyGram in Afghan banks has enabled to portion of this transaction to be documented and registered. So in 2000, for example, as you see here in 2020, was almost $800 million, and it's almost 4% of Afghanistan GPT, and then GDP, and then in 2021, we see decline 300 million, and in 2022 it's 350 million again. And here you see from 2005 until 2020 is the source from data bank is a personal remittances to Afghanistan. So what are the targeting sectors through financial remittances in Afghanistan? As you see here in common, you see a lot of sectors, but as I found during my research, I have identified 4 important sectors. For example, religious purpose, marriage, small personal investment, and miscellaneous expenses. And what is important here that I have found, the significant observation I've made is that apparent lack of interest and willingness to invest at macro and national level. 2 primary hypotheses have emerged to explain this phenomenon. Firstly, the governments and political systems in Afghanistan may either lack the desire or the capability to effectively engage with the Afghan diaspora community and cultivate their trust for undertaking large-scale national investment. Secondly, there seems to be a weakness in the sense of national belonging among members of the diaspora, which could further contribute to their reluctance to engage in a significant investment venture on a national scale. So social remittances, you see the definition of social remittances by Peggy Levitt in 1998, and the way how the social remittances transferred to Afghanistan are almost 3 important waves. For example, through going back to the country, direct contact and engagement through social media platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, and Instagram. So what are the topics discussed in a social media and conversation? These are the main topics that I have found in my research, that the conversation between the Afghan diaspora and the family left behind, current events and political news, social activism, cultural exchange, personal experience, community initiatives, religious and family and relationship. So which strategy? The question that arises here, actors of development and democracy, or vectors of internal tension. The prominent focus in literature regarding migrants, transnationalism activities lies in a democratization of countries of origin. portraying transnational actors as a catalyst for innovation or democratization in their home countries. However, there exists another alternative perspective suggesting that transnational politics could transnational politics could reinforce political dissension from the country of origin. Lyon and Mandawil elaborate this phenomenon. They discuss how governments, oppositions, political parties, and insurgent groups from country of origin aim to promote development strategy and broader geopolitical agenda among their fellow national living abroad. I have noticed this trend primarily within the Afghan diaspora, where internal policies and political division have a direct influence on diaspora orientations and occasionally lead to intra-community tensions, particularly following the Taliban's reinsurgence in August 2021, this practice has become more apparent and is gaining momentum. Certain factions within Afghan diaspora are actively or certain factions within the Afghan diaspora are actively seeking to forge new alliances, often centered around linguistic commonalities, as means to challenge the long-standing dominance of Pashtun spanning almost 260 years. They are utilizing platforms like Twitter and Clubhouse to organize a space for political, historical, and sometimes sociological discourse. Their argument revolves around the assertion that since 1747, save for two brief periods, Pashtuns have maintained a position on a political primacy, often employing discriminatory and violent policies to marginalize other ethnic groups, particularly Persian speakers. They have posed a significant challenge to official historical narratives. Despite concentrated efforts towards mobilization, repressive and exclusionary policy have also contributed to further fragmenting them. Based on my finding, that's important on social and cultural concept and values in traditional Afghan society have experienced significant transformations under the influence of financial and social remittances, as shown by Shoet and her colleagues in 2017. The more migrants are exposed to the host society, its culture, values, and norms, the more inclined they are to adopt and transmit them to their home country. Of course, there is another argument poses that migrants who achieve successfully integration into their host countries may become progressively less connected or involved in the affairs of their home countries, particularly evident in the second and third generation. However, in the context of Afghanistan, it's noted that women often shoulder the primary responsibility within families left behind, although they may encounter significant challenges, particularly when dealing with elder members of family. Wedding ceremony have evolved to become more elaborate and costly affairs. Family now enjoy a more diverse area of food option, and there is a growing emphasis on attending to secondary needs. Notably, there have been substantial changes in design of residential house And if I go further, however, these developments have also led to emergence of social inequality between families with members abroad and those without, which was explained in a Peggy Lewitt's work. The experience of living in exile and migration often evokes a deep sense of longing for one's homeland among migrants. However, there is a notable absence of a strong belonging to the collective identity in Afghanistan. For more, there is a growing controversy surrounding the term Afghan as a collective and national identity, with differing, sometimes continuous perspective emerging. In many instances, Afghanistani is preferred over Afghan as a collective identity. As a conclusion, in conclusion, I would say the migration of Afghan as a personal and family strategy holds a long-standing historical traditional. War and armed conflict have historical triggered significant waves of Afghan migrants. Afghan maintain diverse connection with their country of origin, often facilitate transnational activity through establishment of community network. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this inspiring speech. We really heard very clear analytical report about this Janus phase of dynamic diaspora influences. On the one side, urging some kind of social and economic development, also values and transnationalism. On the other side, fostering ethnic and political conflicts. And we are turning to our last paper, Nostalgia in a Time of Extended Mobility, Remembering and Reimagining Home in the Tajik-Ismaili Diaspora in Russia. Guldastasho, Alibakhshov, the Institute of Ismaili Studies, policy researcher, and also a man of data-driven insights and many other titles. So we are looking forward to this paper, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizers that invited me, that accepted my paper, and I'm delighted to present. Basically, what I'm going to discuss is how Tajik-Ismailis clinched their ancestral heritage by bringing along with them elements of material and immaterial cultures to diasporic context. Particularly the Pamiri traditional house, cheat. I will not be able to cover everything, just I will focus on the traditional house, why they're building it. And I will show that they use it as a symbolic representation of their homeland, as a ritual space, as a container of memory, as a vehicle of transmitting memory from one generation to another. So I will not spend too much time on explaining the context because it has been covered. I will move on to talk about nostalgia. I will bring some debates about this and then bring examples of placemaking and homemaking in other diasporas. And then I will talk about how Tajik-Ismailis are remembering and reimagining home in Russia. So in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's collapse in early 1990s, the world dramatically transformed for the Tajik-Ismailis, who emerged from the shadows of the so-called Iron Curtain. This period of great transformations was further exacerbated by the Tajik civil war, which caused a humanitarian crisis Thousands of lives were lost, and many were displaced, seeking refuge primarily in Russia and Kazakhstan. This mass migration began with individuals fleeing war-torn areas, including the capital in Khatlon province, region to which they had been resettled during the Soviet agricultural collectivization. The displacement was not merely a consequence of war, but was also driven by post-war economic struggles, unemployment, and poverty, pushing many to pursue a better life abroad. People had no choice but to migrate, sometimes leaving behind family members or empty houses. The first group of migrants find themselves in disarray and disillusionment, losing touch with their ethnic and religious roots. Others took a different path. They established communities, institutions to address the diaspora's legal, social, and economic needs, fostering a collective endeavor to maintain their cultural and religious identities. One of such positive examples is the regional public organization NUR. Some of the NUR's activities have been discussed by Turkan and Araf earlier. While being on the move, they bring along with them elements of material and non-material cultures to rebuild the community in diasporic settings. This includes culture and religious rituals and practices, devotional music, which is called maddo, cartoons for children, and nostalgic poetry in their native tongue, celebrating their ancestral heritage. The key among these cultural elements is the Pamiri traditional house, called Chid. The name is Chid, that they have replicated in Russian cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, and Novosibirsk. These houses serve as venue of qasida khoni, maddo khoni performances, funeral ceremony of charo ravshan, and wedding rituals. While Russian scholars like Alexeyev view these practices as an act of self-exoticizing and self-otherizing, this paper contends otherwise. It argues that Chid serves as a locus of nostalgia for the culture, practices, and traditions left behind by migrants, because it is both a living place imbued with memories and feelings, and a ritual space charged with symbols and meanings. Before delving into the specificities of space and its role in evoking memory and nostalgia, it is essential to spend some time to talk about the concept of nostalgia itself. Nostalgia, in a sense of longing for or yearning for home, permeates the literature of civilizations across time. It emerges as a central theme in Homer's The Odyssey, where the Greek hero Odysseus' profound homesickness and yearning for his beloved Ithaca are depicted following the end of the Trojan War. This universal sentiment finds echo in various cultures, as seen in story involving the Persian poet Judaki in Herat. Asked by the courtiers of the Samanid ruler Nas ibn Ahmed, who were homesick after years away from Bukhara, Judaki composed a poem. This poem, filled with longing for home, was meant to persuade the Emir to return. Struck by the poem's evocative power, the Emir leaped onto his saddled horse and set off towards home, Bukhara. Within the scholarly discourse, the meaning of an application of the concept of nostalgia varied over time. In the 17th century, it was perceived as illness. It was diagnosed as psychopathological disorder by Swiss doctor Johannes Hofer, who observed symptoms of paranoia caused by profound homesickness among soldiers and expatriates longing for their homeland. Treatments varied, reflecting the era's medical practices, from recommending to return to familiar surroundings to using leeches. By the 19th century, nostalgia evolved beyond its medical origins, taking its metaphorical meaning by yearning for bygone time. In particular, intensified in Europe amidst dramatic shifts like industrialization, urbanization, and repercussions of the French Revolution. These complex transformations caused an historical rupture, changing the way individuals related to the past and future. One of the fundamental characteristics of this transformation is the imposition of the sense of direction or directionality, like on human history, suggesting that history is linear trajectory moving towards progress, improvement in civilization. For example, Marxist materialist historiography that describes human history in stages from slave society to feudal society, from feudalism to capitalist society, capitalist to socialist society. Another characteristic that stems from the first is the acceleration of modern temporality, that has considerably changed the experience of time, characterized by the fast pace of technological advancements, societal changes, and cultural shifts. This rapid evolution leads to a sense that time itself is moving more quickly, altering the perception of history and our place within it. Pierre Nora's work on France's acceleration of history delves deeply into this phenomenon, highlighting how it impacts collective memory. The dramatic shifts intensify the sense of nostalgia, a longing for the perceived simplicity, stability, or authenticity of bygone eras. The popularity of vintage fashion, heritage preservation efforts, and the romanticization of historical periods are manifestation of this collective yearning. While navigating through an era where the past seems both distant and rapidly receding, the constant displacement of people due to globalization, political and economic crisis, conflicts, and environmental disasters adds another dimension of uncertainty. This backdrop sets the stage for Edward Said's characterization of postmodern condition as, quote, a generalized condition of homelessness, a sentiment reinforced by Lisa Mulkey, who notes that people are chronically mobile and routinely displaced. These dynamics represent a deep-seated reaction against the irreversible flow of time, an attempt to anchor ourselves in aspects of the past that offer comfort and a sense of identity in the face of present uncertainties and complexities. Natalia Boehm, who was the Harvard-based influential scholar and extensively studied nostalgia, argued in her book, which is called The Future of Nostalgia, that nostalgia is not against modernity, but part of it, coexisting with progress. She argues that people can experience and interact with the modern world in ways that are not strictly aligned with mainstream notions of progress and modernization. She uses the term off-modern, which in her opinion allows for a perspective that acknowledges the complexities and contradictions of modern life, including feelings of nostalgia, which do not fit neatly into the straightforward narratives of progress. She writes, it makes us explore, quote, it makes us explore side shadows and back alleys rather than the straight road of progress. It allows us to take a detour from the deterministic narrative of history. For example, Marxist historiography that I mentioned earlier. So what are the tangible expressions of nostalgia within a specific cultural group? How do this manifestation reflecting the collective memory and identity of the group, and how we can capture them to study? So there are diverse ways to capture memory, as evidenced by the work of various scholars. Let's name some. Pierre Nora has introduced the concept of place of memory, showing that physical locations are key in holding collective memories. Aliade and Jen Assman's research into cultural memory revealed how narratives in cultural practices act as memory containers. Paul Connaughton highlighted the significance of rituals and bodily practices in sustaining memories. In the diasporic context, migrants carry with them various material and immaterial elements that act as containers of memory, encapsulating the cultural attributes they have left behind and become estranged from while being on the move. These elements are crucial for preserving and conveying the original cultural identities in new settings. Recognizing the significance of understanding cross-border population flows and their nuances, the European Union in 2016 allocated approximately 1.5 million euros in grants. This funding was aimed at exploring the material and immaterial spaces of migrants' native cultures that they carry with them to host countries, to build diasporic communities. The nuanced ways in which migrants remember and reimagine their past are deeply influenced by their cultural, social, and economic backgrounds. These are cultural elements that serve as conduits of nostalgia and memory, linking migrants to their places of origin. Ahmed called them the soul of significance. These elements, whether they be music, poetry, artifacts, or built structures, are potent reminders of the homeland that, while physically distant, remains a vibrant part of their identity. For example, Bourdieu, a French anthropologist, author of the famous work, The Berber House and the World Reversed, Taking the Kabyle, it pronounced different sources, like I checked different pronunciation. Kabyle in Kabyle house as a, it's also called Berber house, but it is very colonial kind of concept. House as symbol of displacement. Taking the Kabyle house as a symbol of displacement explored how Berber community has rebuilt itself across geographical locations. They turned the traditional house into the symbolic representation of their homeland in the aftermath of forced resettlement in North Africa during the French colonization and the consequent immigration of to France and other European countries in the post-colonial period. Like, if you know Zinedine Zidane, he belongs to that community. The built environment of house had religious and social cultural significance and meaning for the Berbers. It became containers of memory for them in diasporic context. The notion of the material culture must be tied to a specific place for diaspora formation is challenged by Daniel Bayarin examination of Jewish immigrants' use of Babylonian Talmud. Bayarin presents Talmud as traveling homeland, like it is not anchored in space. They take it with them, and it's a foundational text the Jewish communities have carried with them, allowing them to rebuild and maintain their diasporic identity in various contexts. This example broadens the understanding of diaspora, suggesting that it can be anchored not just in physical or tangible elements, but also in shared texts and traditions. Similarly, the experience of the Tajik-Ismailis, as described by Azim Nanji, illustrates another dimension of diasporic remembering and placemaking. From the early days of migration and settlement across East Africa, the Tajik-Ismailis lived in pockets around Jamaat Khanas, which acted as the religious and social focal points. Nanji calls it Jamaat Khana type of organization. Using Bayarin's metaphor of deterritorialized and portable homeland, like the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, Tashif Kara illustrated how Tajik-Ismailis have built and rebuilt their diasporic communities around the system of pluralistic values in the built environment of Jamaat Khanas across British Columbia. Khoja Mulji emphasized the critical role of Ismaili women in placemaking and homemaking through care work such as cooking and storytelling. Historically, the Pamiri Ismailis have used the traditional house not only as a dwelling, but also as a ritual space and communal event for communal and space for communal events. However, in the diasporic context, Chid is not used as a living space, but perceived as symbolic heaven that provide emotional and cultural comfort for migrants. For example, let's read one of the respondents' explanation, like Maimon Shaw. He explained why they are building the traditional house. And he said, like, this is our house. There are the 5 pillars symbolizing the main religious figures. This is so significant for us. When I'm here in the house, I do not want to leave it because I become sad when I do. The older I get, the more attracted I am to home and homeland. This is why we developed the project called Arc of Culture to recreate the entire house. I will further elaborate on these 2 points, symbolic meanings of the architectural elements, and then the name of the project, Arc of Cultures. So the presence of the 5 pillars in the house, each representing a religious figure, is deeply symbolic. These pillars are not just architectural elements, but are imbued with spiritual significance, reflecting the foundational beliefs of the community's faith. They serve as constant reminder of the spiritual lineage that defines the respondent's identity, like the community's identity. The 5 pillars symbolize the Al-Bayt, Hazrat Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Hussein, and the main pillar, the Prophet Muhammad. We will have, we don't have time to discuss all these elements. I will just explain the main pillar. The main pillar, Kha Setan, is called Kha Setan, from Kha king, and Setan pillar is imbued with rich layers of symbolism that goes back to Asian traditions and religious beliefs. The pillar carries a major amount of weight by supporting the beams on which the upper parts of the ceiling rest. The significance of its structural function, it is translated or correlates with the symbolic meanings. In kinship terms, the main pillar signifies a patriarch who protects and provides for their family. In the Islamic times, it symbolizes the Zoroastrian deity Surush, an angel of discipline and masculine strength. In Islamic garb, it symbolizes the Prophet Muhammad. Charlotte Nekusheva's analysis of the Chid lexical semantic field further illustrates how the symbolic architectural elements are woven into the language, creating metaphors and concepts. For example, in the vernacular, one can hear expression associated with the main pillar, Tamadot Tamachasitan, your father is your king pillar, like literal translation of it. We've Khasitan as Meun Wefartash Mukhil Sud. The king pillar, meaning the breadwinner, passed away, and they are going to struggle now. Or when people face adversity, they say Khasitananja, hold the main pillar, which symbolizes appeal to divine support, showcasing how languages and architecture together construct a worldview. Let's discuss the second point. I further inquired about the name of the project, asking why they named the Arc of Cultures. Why they named it Arc of Cultures. Maimon Shaw replied, one Russian visitor, after seeing the interior of the house, told me that it gives an impression of Noah's Ark. I thought about this a lot and decided that it is a good name because through this project, we are trying to preserve our heritage in the face of uncertainties associated with migration. In my understanding, the respondents' comparison of the house to Noah's Ark reflects the idea of safeguarding something precious. In this case, culture and religious heritage. This matter of Ark as sanctuary amidst a flood encapsulates their efforts to preserve their cultural roots and identity, despite the inevitable changes in dislocations brought about by migration. This also illustrates the reinterpretation of cultural symbols in diaspora, showing how interactions with host cultures can add new meanings. The second key finding highlights that Chid role as a central ritual space within the diasporic context, highlighting its significance not only as a physical structure, but also as a vibrant social cultural space. In the state of diasporization, in the condition of diasporization, the Chid transcends its function as a mere private dwelling, as a living space. And it becomes a locus of enactment of traditional practices, rituals, and ceremonies that are pivotal to the community's culture and religious life. The final finding, it underscores the pivotal role of Chid in the intergenerational transmission of memory and nostalgia, particularly as a multisensory environment crucial for the learning and cultural immersion of foreign-born community members. Nasima, one of the respondents, said, most of the children who come here have never visited their homeland. They have heard about their culture and religious heritage from their parents, but have never experienced it firsthand. Here they see the interior design of the house, touch the wooden pillars and other elements. I have observed they ask questions like, what is this and what is that? When they become interested in knowing about the house, it becomes much easier to explain to them. The relationship between body and built environment, as examined by scholars like Maurice Merleau-Ponty and Gaston Bachelard, provides valuable insight into how space influences our perception, memory, and identity. Merleau-Ponty's notions of the lived body underscores the body's active role in experiencing and interpreting the world, suggesting that physical interaction with spaces like the Chid is crucial for constructing cultural knowledge and identity. Bachelard's phenomenological study on the poetics of space, particularly an intimate setting like homes, show how these spaces are imbued with emotional and imaginative significance. The concept of the intimate immensity within domestic spaces demonstrates how personal and collective memories intertwine with the physical and symbolic aspect of our surroundings, enabling deep emotional and imaginative engagement with space. Studying the Berber house, Bordeaux claimed that domestic architecture serves as instrument of thought for those groups who lack writing system. The architectural elements in spatial layout are used as mnemonic device or remembering practices. It is space where they inscribe or encode their social values, norms, myths, and symbols. Bordeaux wrote, The Berber House is a book from which the children learn their version of the world, and it is read with the body, and in and through the movements and displacement, which make the space within which they are enacted as much as they are made by it. This is also applicable to the cheat. I will conclude. Okay. Yeah. To conclude, together these insights underscore the significance of cheat in diasporic context as a dynamic space where memory, nostalgia, and cultural identity are not only housed, but actively transmitted and reimagined through the multisensory and embodied experience of its inhabitants. This emphasizes the cheat's critical role in fostering a tangible and effective connection to the homeland for generations of migrants, enabling them to navigate and bridge their dual identities in a complex and ever-changing world. In weaving together the threads of rapid evolution, intensified nostalgia, and the duality of modern experiences, it becomes evident that our longing for the past is not just about looking backward. It is about finding ways in meaningfully integrate our history and heritage into the fabric of our rapidly changing lives, ensuring that as we move forward, we do not lose sight of where we have come from. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I mean, this was fascinating. Sometimes it's good to conclude with young scholars, because what we saw here is how through use of theory and comparative study, but also some very specific data, we got a paper which is in the same time so particular and so universal. So I find it amazing. Thank you very much.